Giordano. I'm the Director of Operations here at Ovaleye.com, where we offer hosting that empowers your small office, home office lifestyle. And welcome to Web Host Wednesday. It's Wednesday, October... Probably should have looked at that before I did this video. October 12th. And the theme of this video is going to be talking about picking the right host for your small business website. Now, this was an article that ran on Entrepreneur Today, and it's actually about an infographic that one of our competitors came out with, InMotion Hosting. Kudos to you guys. Very smart marketing piece. And if you are actually a small business that's watching this video, this is actually a really good idea. I looked at a press release from Intuit not too long ago for Small Businesses Do It Better, which is another site that Ovaleye runs that goes along with our campaign for making sure that small businesses, it kind of goes into twofold. One, in that small businesses do it better, let's go shop at small businesses, and then two, small businesses, let's do it better. So that's kind of a fun little side note. Anyway, I got this press release from Intuit about an infographic that they just released too, and it's, you know, the same kind of look, same kind of feel. I wonder if they even went with the same company. And with this, they even have a share button at the bottom so that it encourages people to share and post on their own blogs, which is really smart. So if you guys have any type of statistics that you have created within your company, or if you have some kind of really interesting fact or figure when it comes to your industry, it might be worthwhile checking out what the process of creating an infographic goes into. And by an infographic, I mean just a set of information, statistics, or even like the graphic that we're going to be looking at from InMotion. Just a process for what you can look through when you make a purchase. It could be a number of things. You put it in a very appealing, nice, salesy kind of down as you go, and you're able to choose whatever it is, or maybe you come up with a new thought at the end. But anyway, it's something that you should consider as a small business. So going back to our topic of the video is trying to decide where it is that you should be putting your small business website and picking the right host. Now, this is actually a really interesting article because InMotion Hosting did not mention themselves, you know, at the very end you should pick me, but it does say that it was created by InMotion Hosting. So it's not the best explanation of what hosting is, because I think they did a good job, and they explained it how I explain it to all of my clients. With shared hosting, it's like you're in apartment buildings. Virtual private servers are if you're in townhomes or condos, and then a dedicated server is when you're in a house. And that's something I think a lot of web hosts use as an analogy of what it is that we're selling in the different forms. I'm going to add on one other form, and that's going to be more of a cloud hosting type of environment. And so if you think of cloud hosting, I'm going to get into a little bit later, but Ovaleye is a cloud services company, but we don't necessarily do cloud hosting. A virtual private server could be thought of as an element of cloud hosting, but when we talk about cloud services or cloud computing, that's more of a software as a service. It's less of a infrastructure piece that we're going to be talking about, like shared hosting or VPS, that type of a deal. So I'm going to kind of go over what they've written down here and maybe explain it a little bit more for a small business, because based off of what they've written, they did a great job, but there's still some things that I think a small business will come away with saying, well, what does that mean? Or I don't get this. So I'll go ahead and go over that in just a second. And like I said at the very beginning, the one thing that they didn't answer is once you figured out what type of hosting you should go to, then you have to figure out what package fits best for your business at the end and what company to choose. And that is a whole other story. And I believe I did a Web Host Wednesday a while back on an article from Bob Dunn, who's a WordPress developer here in the Seattle area, and he wrote an article on Biznic. So if you want to find that video, go to ovaleye.tv, and you can look up Web Host Wednesday and find that on how Ovaleye answers the questions of which web host to choose. So anyway, going back up to his infographic, let's go ahead and talk about each piece. So the shared hosting, like it mentions here, is as if you're in an apartment building. And the way that I explain it to clients is sometimes that can be good, and sometimes that can be very bad, depending on which web host you choose. So you can think of it as an apartment building. If someone leaves a candle on at night and their apartment lights on fire, the likelihood that your apartment is going to be affected by it is pretty good. They use the analogy of parties. If you have lots of parties, eventually the building management is going to come down and knock on your door and ask you to do something about it. So that's kind of what a shared hosting environment is like. You're on one machine with a lot of different other websites, and depending on what web host you choose, you're going to be with questionable people that may be misusing the server, or maybe the host is actually jam-packing the server with crummy people, or even just not being very responsible about it. And again, that's based on who it is that you choose to go with. So think about that too when you purchase hosting of, well, if this is only $2 a month, or if this is free, what exactly does that mean? What am I really purchasing here? So that's kind of what that was talking about. As far as virtual private servers, or VPS, goes, Ovaleye offers VPS. We don't list it on our website because it's a service we really only offer our shared hosting clients that are already growing their businesses with us. So once you've reached a certain point in traffic, if you have a lot of traffic coming in, or if you need to kind of get some room to stretch and be able to use different applications or different scripts and just kind of go out on your own and really have this custom environment to build a business off of, a VPS might be your next step up. Now, they talk about this as being in a townhome because you've got maybe the walls are a little bit more separated, or they use it, I think, as thicker walls. And then you have, it's just the same idea of what I was talking about. If someone's apartment next door lights fire, it's much less chance that you're going to be affected by it. If someone has a party next door, like they were saying, you're probably not going to hear it as loudly. So that's just one quick little explanation of that, but I still like the analogy of a townhome. The third part is dedicated servers, and this is like having your own house, as they explain. It's completely separated. It's really just your machine that you've got free control over. And now dedicated servers can come in a lot of different ways too within each, depending on which hosting provider you go with. You could have a managed dedicated server, or you could be totally in control of it. And as a small business owner, if you don't have an IT department or you don't have a developer on staff, that could be a scary thing. So 3 things to really think about here. Adding on a 4th one, we're talking about cloud hosting, and that's more of the Amazon environment. A lot of you are familiar with them as a company offering this because they have, I believe, a file sharing component to it where you can have, I think, I forget the size, so I shouldn't mention it, but a certain amount of free space on it too for file sharing. So what cloud is, and the way that I've kind of looked at it when explaining it to clients, is if shared hosting is an apartment building, if VPS is a townhome, and dedicated hosting is a house, then the cloud hosting, or an Amazon environment, something that's more elastic that can grow, that's kind of like living in a commune. So you've all got this space that you share and that you can expand into. If you run out of food, or you have a big party over or something like that, you can go into your neighbors and kind of use theirs. So cloud hosting is when you've got multiple machines working together, that if your website spikes in traffic all of a sudden, you're able to then expand without having to purchase additional servers. Many companies also have it so that you only purchase what you actually use, which is really nice too as a small business owner. There's a lot of cons that go along with it as a small business owner, and I'll get into that in just a second, but that was the 4 different types that I would have kind of gone over. So this is really good stuff. So we're going down, and again, they've added in a shared server houses hundreds of accounts. VPS has much of the capability and performance of having your own machine, because VPS, I don't know if I explained that correctly, but it's a virtual private server, so it's kind of bringing in a cloud kind of element into it, that you're cutting one machine into maybe 5 or 6 different machines within that physical piece of hardware. And without going into it too much more, that's where you get that townhome kind of element into it. So you're using the same physical machine, but with your own virtual machine stuffed into there. It's pretty cool, actually. And then the last piece that they talked about is that the dedicated servers are the top of the heap. As the name implies, the entire server is dedicated to you. We kind of went over that already. And they have some nice other little graphics along with it. You guys as small business owners should definitely think about this. So shared hosting, I wanted to explain a couple of their bullet points. Where most websites live is shared hosting, and that's true. So most small businesses really don't need a virtual private server or a dedicated server. Some women that come to Ovaleye, it's very interesting, their husbands will set something up with them for a dedicated server. Just because they get really geeked out on it and excited, and they set it all up. They maybe have rack space and everything for it in a data center, and then they just don't have the time to keep up with it. And there's really no need other than the fact that it was just fun at one time. So that's kind of something to think about. Do you really need the dedicated server for right now? Should you just work with the resources you have and go with shared? And that's based on if you have a small amount of traffic and not a whole lot of scripts or fancy things going on there. They mention here best for websites with low to moderate traffic and CPU requirements. And CPU, if you look at terms of service and TOS, we'll just say that, terms of service agreement, it'll usually list CPU saying something like 25% of usage, and that's when the point where they'll shut your website down. And we actually have received a lot of inquiries about this, that their hosts have shut them down because they've used too much of the CPU. And what is the CPU? CPU is like the brain of the computer. So, for example, I'm a mom and a business owner, and at times, depending on who's got my attention at one point, 25% of my brain, if they're using that, then if the business is using 25% and my child is screaming and upset, I definitely have a kind of a shutting down point. There's some point in me that I'll start to melt down, right? So a web host is just being, is using due diligence to make sure that if someone's using more resources than they can, if you're in an apartment building, if someone's using more of the garbage, or if they're misusing some of the shared HOA resources, then there's going to have to be a certain point where you're just like, gotta cut them off. And ladies and gentlemen, you're able to really manage that by just making sure that you cut off some of the plugins that you're using within WordPress. There's people with hundreds of plugins in there, and maybe 80% of it they don't even use. So just make sure that you clean things out. Another thing is that most hosting providers, if you're in a shared space, based on the terms of service, you're really paying for website files to be stored there, for email to be hosted there. You're not paying them to host your movies or your photos, your huge, ginormous photos. You're not paying them to back up your desktop. You're really paying them for website hosting. So be careful in that too. If you do anything against their terms of service, they also have grounds to shut you off depending on what type of agreement you've signed up for. So just kind of pay attention to that if you're in shared hosting. So yeah, look through your TOS. What else was I going to try and explain a little bit further? I think since this video is getting a little bit long, I'll cut it off on that. But I'll make sure that I include a link over to this image over at ovaleye.tv. And again, it was created by a competitor of ours, but that's okay. You guys did a good job. I think we had very different clientele, so I wanted to go ahead and give them kudos for that. And if you're a small business, definitely check out the idea of getting some type of infographic together. But the last piece I wanted to kind of touch on is if you are, let's say that you decided, oh yes, shared hosting is the way to go. Before I go on, some people, too, we are seeing this a lot with bloggers, some people use a mixture of all four of those services that I just talked about. They'll use shared hosting, a little bit of shared hosting, or maybe they'll go to a VPS, and then they'll host their images or videos or anything like that over on the cloud, something like Amazon or Rackspace or something like that, where it's more of a cloud environment, and then do all of their web files over on a virtual private server if they're a blogger that has pretty good traffic. So something to think about. But so let's say that you decided to go with shared hosting or anything like that. Then check out my video on Ovaleye.tv about how to choose the right web host. So this has been Jennifer Dawn. I'm the Director of Operations here at Ovaleye.com, where we offer hosting that empowers your small office, home office lifestyle. Thank you so much if you're live with me over on Ovaleye.tv/live. Thank you so much for showing up, and I hope that was okay. Definitely tweet us over at Ovaleye if you have feedback or questions. But otherwise, happy Wednesday. Thanks, guys.